Um, it's lovely to see you all. I sort of, in a funny way, miss these online communities. So it's sort of nice to be on a group Zoom call again after a while of not being on one. Um, Thank you so much for having me. Um, I'm assuming that you have some sort of blurb about my background, and so I'll jump straight into the slides. I've got slides that I'll share on your screen, and at the beginning, I'm going to talk about my influences and how I got into 3D as a professional artist. And then I'll tell you when it's time for the 3D glasses. So at the beginning, there's no 3D glasses yet. Okay, so let me share the screen here. Um, and then I'm going to press play. There we go. Okay. Um, so I started doing 3D in 1994. I'm one of those, probably in Germany, it's not so unusual, but in America it is. But I'm one of those um, dual people who wears the art historian hat and the artist hat. I write about art. So this is a book that I wrote with my art historian hat, and it's available in the U.S. with University of Chicago Press, and in Europe at Intellect Books London. And I can put the link in the chat. And I have a discount code. I think it's Intellect 30, which is 30% off, I believe. But it has a lot of anaglyph images in it by my contemporaries, and it was my attempt to bring together artists who work in 3D and use the stereoscope in different ways from about 1960 to today. And I sort of some of my work is in there too, but most of it is by other artists. But anyway, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm a retired photography professor from Kansas State University, and I've been doing um, art since the early 90s. And and I do public art, drawing. I work in alt processes a lot, and I do stereo. So it's my hope that all of you will get something out of this talk to take away. It might be inspiration, it might be thinking about the content and meaning of your and other people's work in a different way, or something unrelated about life as an artist or thinking outside of the box, and making that a reality. So I'm going to share a little bit about my background. I knew when I was 16 and living in a small Bavarian village near Lake Constance, der Bodensee, in Germany, that I wanted to be an artist and a photographer, preferably one living in London or New York City. I felt a foreigner there because I was. My mother was English. It's a long story. I watched too many Woody Allen movies and decided that New York would be a great place for me to end up. And so after being sent to boarding school in England at age 16, from being in school in Germany, I focused all my academic study towards this goal, contrary to my parents' wishes. Aside from learning the traditional history of art and photography, I was also exposed very early to the theories of photography, to film theory, psychoanalysis, semiotics, and structuralism. In other words, how do images function in society? I wrote here, Histories and Institutions of Photography. This was the title of one of our modules in college. And so I have only recently realized how unusual this is, and was at the time, and how this course may have helped me find my own peculiar kind of work output early on in life, when I was 20. I'm also very active as an advocate for the arts and photography as a way of making a living. It is possible, and we live with a myth that one has to be poor if one is an artist, and this is simply not true. So I am active, also helping people to know about the industry and understand how to navigate it and how to work commercially and how to work in different arenas in photography and film. My interest has always been in making the viewer ask him or herself questions. And these images, by the way, are from some image text work that I did very early on as a student. Um, and I also wanted to expose the process of vision itself through the use of stereo photography. Is vision purely mechanical, biological phenomena, or do other factors come into play, such as past experience of the person and past images that they've encountered, and also their culture? Hold on, I'm gonna close my door because my dactyl is barking. I'm sorry about that. This is kind of the first time I've done a Zoom talk since I've had her. Sorry. So my work is based on the theory that viewers bring their own meanings to anything that they look at, be it art or an advertisement, namely their associations, which are culturally through lived experience. And the image and text are two systems of language put together to create third meanings. And I was very interested in playing with image and text and how I could use that in my art. And this is a slide from a book called The Ideal Sight Restorer. It uses elements of photo montage and text together. So this interplay between image and text, I hope, helps the viewer untangle these structures of meaning and laugh a little as well. In other words, I want to make the viewer work a bit and ask questions, and most importantly, think. After all, what use is a work of art if it does not leave you in wonder, thoughtful, and perhaps chuckling a little bit? At first, I made these artist books, and later, towards the end of my bachelor degree, I worked with stereo imagery. And in terms of my influences, John Hartfield was a big one. Photomontage and constructed photography seem to pose an endless palette of ways in which to investigate different themes and create multiple meanings with one image, and ultimately a tool through which to explore the world around me. The work is also influenced by artists such as Barbara Kruger, who actually started in advertising and then went to the art world. And the brothers Quay, Rosalind Krauss's writings, and George Méliès, the pre-cinematic history, and optical devices from pre-cinematic history, such as the stereoscope, of course. It's only one of many. Many of my images are political, feminist, or are about photography as a field and how it intersects with our lives in different forms. We have the family snapshot, we have the government archive, news photography, advertising, journalism, photography of the body and how it sometimes objectifies the body, and iconic imagery and this collective unconscious that we have of images that we've seen in our culture. This is so one of my other influences is British advertising. At the time when I started, the government in England had banned showing someone smoking. This is in the early 1980s. And so then the cigarette adverts became very, very creative. And the main cigarette brand in Britain was Silk Cut and Benson and Hedges, which I don't know if you know them. They might not be so well known in Germany. And so these were two Silk Cut advertisements, very, very clever. The right one is sort of linking to the Psycho movie, obviously. And this is another one. So sometimes the meanings are derived from the image text combination. In these adverts, obviously the text is just either here it says must have silk, or it's just knowing in your head that the name of the cigarette company is Silk Cut. And then other times there's more than that going on, and there's sort of a sentence. So I'm hoping to encourage people to question the world around them, and think and wonder, I suppose. This is what the stereoscopes looked like early on, and they are very rudimentary at the beginning, and I then progressed to I was thinking about them as sculptures and using Malcolm McLuhan's "the medium is the message" philosophy in all my work. I try to use the material because the material you use speaks. The way you present it, the whole form of the work speaks. And so for photographers, this is often hard because I cross over the medium boundary into sculpture. I did not want to use the home stereoscopes because they say 19th century. We know them, they're familiar, and a lot of people ask me that, and I've always made my own stereoscopes. They already exist, the home ones, and they don't cohere visually with what the work is about. So I use the stereoscope as a language for people outside of the group that is in the know about stereo as a sculptural symbol. And so oftentimes the people who see the work, they don't know anything about stereo, and they counter it in an art context. Maybe there's paintings on the wall or sculptures. The blank white stereoscope as a sort of head or a box on a sculptural conceptual level is something that I was very interested in. It acts as a symbol of visuality, for the connection between the brain and the eye. The image earlier is actually a brain and eyes of an animal. And I was always fascinated that our eyes are actually very, very attached to our brain. Whoopsie. And the box also isolates the image so much that one could not pass by an exhibition and see the images from far. You have to engage. You have to go up to the image. Um, and this is also something that I wanted to force the viewer to work a little bit. So another aspect that comes into play with them is something that Christopher Ho came up with. He was a critic who wrote about my work, and he noted that there is a dual view of the work. So this dual structure of the gaze, we have people looking into these boxes. So at first we see other people looking. That's one view of the world, and then of the gallery, and then you go and look yourself, and you're aware that others are looking at you, looking into the box. Similar to when you look through a keyhole of a door. And I thought this was an interesting aspect of having an installation of stereoscopes. I just want to check, is everybody still there? I can't see. Everybody's
Yes.
still there, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Coming
Okay.
through.
Live.
Yes.
Okay, I
Yes,
can't see
yes.
a thing, so I could be cut off and I wouldn't know because I can only see my slides.
Coming through
Okay.
clear.
Okay, good. So if you dropped off, I would just be talking on my own. I wouldn't know. So this sort of aspect of the work I know might be sort of unusual or different in a stereo community, but it's what ended up placing the work in the world of sculpture and in the world of just general conceptual art, rather than, it's never really fit in very well in the photography world, or pure photography galleries usually don't like this work of mine. They like my wet clothing works because they're in a frame and they're on the wall and they're flat. And then these works are more, people are more interested in them if they are coming from like painting and sculpture. Let's see here. So this is another view of them. I at first made them out of wood, which was very, I began the damage to my hands in 1998 when I started making these in wood, and I started woodworking and finishing them with gesso and rabbit skin glue and all these like 19th century materials to make them really smooth. And now I 3D print them. I can show you at the end how they look 3D printed, but they look actually very similar. It's just they're much lighter. Okay, so now you can put on your glasses, And I'm going to show you some of the work and talk a little bit less. The beginning, I have a little bit about them, and then I'll just sort of go through them. And they are mostly sets. I went to many residencies. I was at Lightwork, at the Headland Center for the Arts, at Banff Center. And so this particular image, I remember I took at Lightwork in Syracuse, New York. They have a gigantic studio. They have like bigger facilities. So sometimes I would work quite small on a tabletop, and other times I was able to work larger when I had access to studios that were bigger, that had giant stairways that go out. You could shoot from above and things like that. So this is actually me, and it's a sort of an introductory image to the series, the Institute of Incoherent Geography. And so I want to read a little bit about these. So my deliberate use of black and white photography can produce nostalgic and appropriated utopian associations in the viewer. Images are poking fun at our society of the spectacle, according to Guy Debord, by creating their own commentary on the world. The stereo 3D space is used here as an imagined subjectless space, this black background, one with no references to the real world. The stereoscopic effect of space in film and photography positions the viewer in an extremely individualized spatial matrix within that 3D world. This is called the Black Gold, or Tribute to Ed Ruscha. And so photography is ubiquitous, yet the art photograph aims to produce a critique on the existing everyday photography in our culture. And this idea that art is a critique of photography doesn't only exist as art. It exists in all these institutions that I mentioned earlier. And when, from this sort of very British theoretical perspective, the art photograph was there to critique the other photography. And so that is still how I teach and how I think of my work. And I use text with image to evoke these third meanings and associations. And of course, there's all these puns in the air. Obviously, Ed Ruscha took photographs of mundane American gas stations. And this was actually the first image in which I experimented with mixed success with adding things digitally. So the oil, what is supposed to be oil in the air, the black bolt, was done in, I believe, Illustrator or Photoshop. And I figured out how to graphically create 3D using the computer. And so it's a tabletop image done in the studio, like all of them, but then the black gold, the oil, is added digitally, which is very rare. I think it might be the only one where I did something like that. This one is called The World of Type A. Fictionality within photography is used in most of the work to create the most extreme opposite of what documentary photography claims to do. So rather than showing what is already in the world, constructed worlds ask the viewer to reflect on a variety of themes embedded in our collective photographic memory. And some of these images sort of might remind you of an iconic image on the moon, and so I purposely do that. So from the moon landing to instructional or scientific photography, the work uses the language of what Guy Debord terms the spectacle, that is the dazzle of the media. And so let me go through some of these are really early. This is called Unwritten Histories. We did a lot of critical theory and also what they call critical race theory here now, but we just called it theory. These are two eyeballs hanging in a box. This was really, really early. I think this was actually maybe 1994, not 1998. But history is continually rewritten and revised because it's written by a certain group, and which leaves stories out. And so that's what this one was about. And then this was also a really early one. And in the 3D version of this, he should have like a really long nose. And if you move your, and the ears are really far away, so it's a hyper stereo in a way. And I wanted the nose to be like Pinocchio. And so if you move your head left and right, you can see his head sort of turn and his face is sort of elongated. The historians gave us delightful fiction. We read a lot of John Carr, which really it changed my whole outlook on life. Then this was the tribute to Foucault. This is maybe 2007. Um, this is a very popular image. I personally don't love it, but everybody loves this image a lot. It's on like book covers and things. Um, this is not a stereoscope. And then this one I thought is still today holds up so well. The unbearable lightness of being an intellectual. I was in New York on 2001 and 9/11. I lived there. And this one, I don't know if you can read it well, but it says the intellectuals are kept on the shelves of the propaganda ministry like pots of jam to be eaten later when the war is over. And you see this sort of stance in the images that is looking at the present, or at that time the present, from another perspective, like another world. Obviously, there's no propaganda ministry, but it's all symbolic. And so I imagined this other world where looking at our present as if it was in the past, if that makes sense. And so looking back, oh, this is what happened. And when I think about what's happening today, uh, it still works. Um, it's also about the fact that in Europe, I think in Germany and especially in France, intellectuals play such an important role. They're so respected. They are the ones that spend their life analyzing what's happening from the wide perspective, and they are revered and listened to and really even consulted by politicians. We hope. But the intellectual is the underdog in America, and especially after 9/11, there was these voices of these big intellectuals on the jars were suppressed, from what I could tell. And it was a very big change, I suppose, in society. Nothing was ever the same. Um, then the entire planet seemed to be staging a stupidity contest. The first aid kit. This is again from this fictional future perspective, looking on now, and this is obviously about the post-war period. And this book actually exists, How to Survive an Atomic Bomb. And I made this after 9/11 because we were told to have a gas mask and duct tape in case we were gassed out of our apartments and we'd have to tape up the door. And we did walk around with gas masks because people were so afraid that that there would be another anthrax attack in the subway or somewhere in a skyscraper. So these come from that time. Um, and then this one was about the weird nationalistic imagery that was shown on television in America in between things. So in between an advert and in between a TV program, you'd see like this flag float through the screen. And never before had I seen this, and it was just so bizarre. And it was sort of a little bit about that, but it's also about nationalism and flags and things. This one is called the turkey. It's more about more sort of a social image, the Thanksgiving turkey. Um, he was a wretched fellow to talk to, a regular cynic, quite a rarity in America. And how are we doing for time? I didn't turn on my clock. Oh, it's okay. Half an hour now? I can't hear you.
Well, you're on for 25 minutes. You
Okay.
have that.
And so I'm almost, so this is the Celestial Special Forces. And this one in 3D can see I was able to manipulate the arrows can go to different areas. So in these ones, the text was digital. They may be a little bit too hyper for the screen because they're made for a projection, I think. Um, can you read it okay, what it says in there?
If you close one eye.
Okay. Yeah, so, or you can move back if it's hard. This one says new sections of the celestial populace winding down from being functional all their lives on Earth. It's sort of a futuristic one. This is also shot from above, and there's like a person's ear inside the skirt there. The problem of plastics. This one is about, it's sort of a reminder that the plastic's made of oil too. Plastic is very political and people forget sometimes. And this one is called Framing the Shot. Um, it's sort of a poke on, it's about war, but it's also about the way it's in which photographers, they will select a frame and deselect what's in the frame and bring branches that they put in the corners of the images. And so it's uh, a little bit of a pun about that. And then I put this in the end. I have a few of these, this other project in 3D, and then I have the public art project that I did. If you want me to, I can talk about the public art project as well, if there's time. But these were done with a homemade pinhole camera and a flash. And these are called, it's a series called Flea Dreams, and I photographed the body really, really close up with pinhole, which means it's super wide angle. So this is the back of a heel looking towards the front of a foot. And you might have to move your head back a bit to make the 3D work away from the screen. And so these are, at that time you couldn't buy a stereo pinhole. So I made my own stereo pinhole camera. This is the corner of the eye. I made one with two plastic Holgers. I took the lenses off. I sawed them off, and then I made my own pinholes in the front, and they're shot on this 120 film. But there's a whole series of these. I just didn't have enough time to put them all in there. And then there's many more of these. So these are newer ones that aren't in anaglyph. And this is the colonization of space. These are also done like 2010, 2014. The burden of representation. Um, this was in 2016, the president neglect. This was when Trump was golfing all the time and didn't really do anything. Okay, so I'm going to forward this. Oh yeah, so do we have time to quickly talk about the public art project?
I think if you can do it shortly, I think it would
Okay.
be interesting because I saw we have Roman here who did a similar thing, if I remember correctly. So that
Oh,
would
good.
be
Okay.
awesome.
Yeah, so this project I've done many times and it's been displayed in different cities with different images inside. But it's a sort of a pun on the sightseeing binocular that you see. And the first time I did it was in Philadelphia, where we had a sort of a brief and it was a commission. And I basically asked it was called the Visionary Sightseeing Binoculars. And I asked community groups of teenagers what they would like to see on this overpass in Philadelphia. And in Philadelphia, they destroyed the Chinatown and they built a highway. They've done this in many U.S. cities where they always destroy the weakest community. And they built a highway, and then on the overpass, I placed these binoculars. There were two of them. And inside, I showed two images of the past, how it looked when the buildings were exactly there at that viewpoint, and then of the future and how local teenagers would like to see this area changed. And so I worked with, this is sort of another view of how it looked. It's very noisy. It divides up the city. On the right, there's the Chinatown. On the left is the more wealthy area. And I let me see. I got some images. And so you look inside, you turn a crank. There are 4 images in there. There are 120 slides. And the past images are taken from archives. And the future images are photo montages that I make in a workshop with the kids. And then I make it into 3D in Photoshop. So this is the inside of the binocular on the right. This is it in Brooklyn. I did it in Brooklyn as well. It was funded by LMCC, Lower Manhattan Cultural Council. And these are some of the things that they did. They, one of them made a car catapult to get rid of the cars. It's so noisy. And this is one of the historical images that shows how it looked before they made this sort of underpass. Yeah. But that project is it's malleable, and I've done it. I change the images obviously and adapt it to wherever it's going to go. And they are permanently in, one of them is permanently installed at the Springfield Art Museum as a way to show the renovation of the museum. And then they've been done in different cities. So that's it. That's all I have. Thank you.